This video is Microcredentials and Us. It's about how microcredentials could be used in the NZDE and BNG Tech programs. Uh, a version of this was presented to the NZBED uh, BNG Tech forum in February 2021. So let's get started. First of all, definitions. Let's start with a credential. It's quality achievement or quality used to indicate a person's suitability for something. So your driver's license indicates you have a suitability or ability to drive a car. Your 400-meter swimming certificate shows that you can swim 400 meters and so on. In education, we have certificates, diplomas, and degrees, which indicate that you have passed a set body of learning. Micro-credentials takes that education credential smaller. That's all they're doing. Is a recognition of a mastery of a small package of learning, or in the case of the NZQA one, a coherent set of skills and knowledge. So that brings me on to the next bit. In New Zealand, we sort of have two things very similar, but they are both called micro-credentials, and there are some differences. So the first one I call competency-based micro-credentials. Really, I'm just using that term to distinguish it from the NZQA micro-credentials. And it recognizes a single competency. Its size is 1 to 3 credits, which makes it smaller, sometimes significantly smaller than the NZQA micro-credentials. That means 10 to 30 hours of study for someone who is new to the topic, which means that someone working part-time, say 4, 6, 8 hours a week, is going to be able to complete the learning and the demonstration of competency within days or weeks. The other version of micro-credentials is the NZQA micro-credentials, which is defined by the NZQA and which has a micro-credential register on the New Zealand qualifications framework. So it recognises a coherent set of skills and knowledge, not one competency, a group of them that are related together. It is 5 to 40 credits, which means that someone new to the topic is going to take 50 to 400 hours to develop the skills and demonstrate the mastery of those competencies to get the micro-credential, which means that it's going to take most people months to acquire one of those micro-credentials. Both of these are really useful to us, and the way they're recorded, I think, is that the competency-based micro-credentials would be internal to the Te Pukenga. These are quite a useful way of recognizing smaller packages of learning within our programs. They're too small to really have a formal recognition process other than internal. Um, and quite frankly, a student could end up with several hundred of them, which makes it quite unwieldy, which is where the NZQA micro-credentials come in handy. They would be formally recognised, they'd be sitting on the New Zealand qualifications framework, and they would be recognising specific um, roles or skills that is of use to industry, and it makes it easier for both students to demonstrate their abilities and for employers to recognize those abilities. So these two types of micro-credentials work together. In time, we could call competency-based micro-credentials learning modules or something like that, but I do call them this because when you read the literature, oftentimes when they're referring to micro-credentials, they're talking about these things, the competency-based micro-credentials. So stacking. The real advantage of having learned smaller bite-sized packages of learning is that flexibility. You can stack them. That means you arrange them. And the analogy here is Lego blocks. One Lego block by itself doesn't mean all that much. But if you've got a group of Lego blocks and you arrange them in a certain way, you can make a lighthouse, an igloo, a windmill, or a castle with the same set of blocks. So what this means in reality is micro-credentials can be used by the learner to plan and follow their own learning pathway to achieve their own individual needs. And I'll sort of demonstrate that a little bit more later on, which is quite a valuable thing. It allows learners to take control of their learning. It also allows industry to define, focus in on a set of competencies that they really want their people to learn, and we provide the mechanism uh, to both provide that and to recognise it. So stacking is really the essence, the benefit of it. So looking at how that might work in education, um, it could be an alternative delivery method within the education system. So instead of having a whole lot of courses, we could have some courses which are delivered via micro-credentials. Uh, that has several options. So first of all, it may be that we have project-based learning, where there's a project which uses a series of micro-credentials drawn from other courses. And the students, as they progress through their project, do the micro credentials. So that makes project-based learning a little bit easier. Um, I'm not suggesting that this be replace the existing system where students do courses, 4 courses per semester. Um, it can be it is compatible with it. It can be an alternative. So there could be a mix of some courses or groups of courses delivered with micro credentials, and some are just the straight courses. So that's what I mean by an alternative delivery method. Another benefit or potential use is bridging education. Uh, a student may be lacking certain skills and need to do a few micro credentials to develop those skills and then go into the main program, whether that's a combination of micro credentials or whether that's conventional course system. Examples of this might be maths and physics to get into the NZDE program, or for workers, as I'll discuss later on, it might be academic skills, being able to do time management, being able to produce spreadsheets, being able to do Word, um, study skills, those sort of things. So it could be the soft skills or it could be the hard skills like maths and physics. Assessment of prior learning. Now, when we have workers or people that have got some experience in engineering come to us, often we find they've got maybe 50 to 60% of a course that they have experience in, but we can't give them the course because they need at least 80%. So with micro-credentials, if you've got a course that's divided into micro-credentials, then you could say, yes, you've got these ones, so you've got that whole course. Yes, you've got that, the skill set recognized or the competency recognized by that micro-credential, and you've got the one recognized by this one, but you're lacking these two. So these are the 2 micro-credentials you need to do, and then we will be able to give you the whole course. So it means that uh, people with experience get that experience recognized when they come into the program, and we're also able to cover for where they are lacking knowledge much easier than the way it is at present with just big courses. Another one is additional new competencies. So this can work several ways. One might be that industry comes to us and says, hey, we need a whole lot of people who have this particular competency. Um, and we could add this into the course. But if we were talking about a conventional 15 credit course, that could take us a year to develop um, and then another semester to deliver. But if it was just a micro credential, a 1 or 2, 3 credit micro credential, then we could develop it within the month and then have students doing it, develop it and get it quality assured and checked, going through the process, and then have students doing it the following month. So we could have students coming out with that competency within a couple of months of industry asking for it. So this is a very powerful way for us to be able to respond to the changing needs of industry, if there's any big gaps or anything like that. So our courses might have one 15 credit course, which is industry projects or something like that, where we're able to put these type of micro credentials into part of the course if they're relevant to the course. And it might be that some of these little micro credentials, we find that we need another one and another one and another one. And so eventually they stack up to be a larger qualification or a role. So an example might be industry comes to us and says we need people that can fly drones. teach them to fly drones, we do a micro-credential. They say we need people to process the data, we produce another micro-credential. We need people to take the data and turn it into um, drawing programs, so we produce another one. So you'd incrementally develop these micro credentials, and then you might end up with a bigger credential, an NZQA one, a role, which might be a drone pilot or drone surveyor or something like that. So it allows us to very quickly respond to new needs, new competencies. Also allows us to provide additional competencies that the students might need outside of their course. So, for example, the NZDE is really all about horizontal infrastructure, but we could add another a micro credential in there so students have a little bit of information about vertical infrastructure, the parts of a building, and all that sort of thing. So it's the micro credentials allow us to sort of make the adjustments we need to optimize um, our alignment with industry. And lastly, professional development. This is someone's has graduated, and they want to add a little bit more information. So that might be new competencies that industry asks us to develop, or it might be that the person wants to develop management skills, for example. We could be pulling micro credentials from other courses. So, for example, we could take our Bachelor of Management or Business, and they could be doing little micro credentials from that if they're in a management role, uh, all that sort of stuff. So, a big framework full of micro credentials would allow us and students quite a bit of variety and ability to cover the needs of industry. So I just want to show you how stacking would work in principle. So let's say we've got a young cadet that's come from school, being hired by a construction company, comes on site. Or it could be a construction worker who the company has decided to promote up into the engineering role, but they need to develop the academic skills. So it starts in January, the student is working. So in January, they might do the courses that they need um, just to get an understanding of what uh, engineering is. Then it would be the project starts with earthworks. So they'd learn about earthworks, they'd learn about soil testing. So they'd be learning the skills they need to be able to go out and do the soil testing at the same time as that work is underway. So they're learning those skills and then they're applying them. So the learner is uh, learning what they need to learn at the particular time when they need to know it. Soil improvement, so that might be happening. Then we'd be putting pipes in the ground and building the road. So they'd be learning about that. The next time they'll be learning about the tests that we do for road maintenance and stuff like that. So they're learning stuff that they need to know to be useful on the site. So as the project is advancing through, they're learning how to be useful. And they're developing a core competency. Every one of these that they do, they become more useful to the company. They grow their knowledge and stuff like that. And this also illustrates another thing about micro-credentials is you do them when you can do them. So this one, they've got a lot of time on their hands, gets a bit busy during March through to May, so we can only do one micro-credential per month. Then we're into the winter, and so they can catch up on micro-credentials. So a micro-credential framework would allow students to proceed through the, um, the, their learning as they need it and when they can do it. So let's look at the NZQA type micro-credentials. So the NZQA has just recently announced that programs leading to qualifications may include micro-credentials as components of learning. And I understand that that means that we can take bits, micro-credentials from our courses and use them to be recognised on the NZQA micro-credential register, which is really quite valuable. Now, one way could be that we've got a whole lot of micro-credentials, so we divide our courses into micro-credentials, and then it could be recognised of specialisation. So it could be you've done the highway engineering courses. So there's about 2 or 3 courses for our highway engineering, and if they do all of those, then that could be something sitting on the NZQA register. But the real valuable one is if we mix and match them for industry roles. So we've identified industry roles related to civil engineering, um, site engineer, for example, CAD operator, road maintenance engineer. So what we could do is we could take little bits of each course that provide them with the competency that they need for that specific role. Because at present, our courses prepare our students for 5, 6, 10 roles. But if we went through our courses, we could actually pick out the bits that relate to, say, site engineer. So it might be that he does a couple of papers, a couple of micro-credentials out of the geotechnical papers, a couple out of uh, the management papers, so a few construction practices. So together, that group of competency-based micro-credentials can stack to demonstrate all of the competencies the student needs to be a site engineer. Then they would go to the NZQA micro-credential register, and they would get that recognition that they can act as a site engineer, which means that a person could spend maybe 6 months to develop skills in a particular area, and then go out into industry and earn money for their family, or and so that allows them to earn while they learn. So then they would do the rest of their course part-time, um, part-time courses and stuff. So this is very much the model of the old NZCE, where students came out with a core set of competencies, and then they developed it as they were working. Um, and that's a very valuable way for people to learn, is if you're doing while you're studying the same thing that you're doing, that is a very powerful way to gain mastery over a particular subject. So let's look at a micro-credentials project. So we were quite we felt that there was an advantage of being able to use micro-credentials to get workers, construction workers, up into the industry. We have a pipeline from schools. We get the schools kids, but we thought, well, we're not getting enough engineers, and there are a whole lot of people that are construction workers in their 20s, 30s, who really want to advance into the engineering role, but they don't have the academic skills. So what we did was we took one of our courses, um, and we produced 5 micro-credentials for it. Now, these micro-credentials were produced from the competencies. So we actually determined what the competencies required for carrying out the role of a road engineer were, and we developed these micro-credentials, and then we align those micro-credentials to the learning outcomes. So if a student does all 5 of these micro-credentials, then they would have met all of the learning outcomes. Now what happened was we got permission to sort of do this. It was agreed that if a student did have all of these 5 micro-credentials, they could do it. Went out to industry, and a lot of people were really keen on the idea, but wary of the whole thing. It was something new, something unusual. They didn't really see how it worked. Um, and I spent a couple of months going to everyone, and I just couldn't get any movement. We did have a partnership with Downers, and they were able to provide us with 7 learners, and we met with those people regularly every month. 3 just did not engage, 4 did. During that period, we also had another person come on board and have a look, but she dropped away pretty quickly as well. The people that we were working with, the 4 that actually did engage in this process, were all experienced construction workers. They all knew road construction backwards. They were all motivated to advance. They didn't want to be construction workers all their lives. They felt that they could be engineers. They had a minimal formal education. Now we thought that we could sort of account for that by uh, embedding development, of their academic skills within the micro credentials, but it turned out that we really should have run some um, courses beforehand about basic academic skills, rather than trying to embed them. So only 3 micro. So the project went from March to December 2019. Only 4 micro credentials were issued, so it was a failure. But we learnt quite a bit from it. And here's the lesson. So a new approach, it was out by itself, even though it was linked into the NZDE, it was sort of out by itself, and industry just didn't really see it. Really, if we were running this again, we'd really need it as part of the NZDE, something that you offer to students as an alternative rather than a separate initiative. Basic academic skills, yes, we needed to develop those basic, if you're going to, basic academic skills. If we're going to take someone from not having those skills into online learning in particular, they really need to have that intermediate bridging process where they develop um, soft skills and academic skills. The learners all had knowledge, but they found the assessments hard. So it was quite funny that they could tell me, they could sit there and talk to me about all of the tests that they do during a when they're laying a road, but they couldn't take that information and put it onto a spreadsheet, which would be a quality plan, which is all the step that they needed to take. And once again, that was that academic skills. They needed to be walked through a spreadsheet and how that all works. They also had problems with time. They were working 50-hour weeks, but also they didn't develop a routine. So when we looked at the Moodle, they were doing a couple of hours and then they'd leave it for a week, and then they'd do a few more hours. So doing it in spurts, they didn't develop a routine to do it. So once again, that's something that needs to be taught. In connectivity, some of them didn't have any, uh, they had connectivity, but the online system was just a little bit hard for them to get to and navigate around. So what we did was we put a lot of them on flash drives. So that's my presentation. If you've got any questions, please contact me, Hugh Wilson, hwilson@unitech.ac.nz. Thank you.